Sedaj po odmoru nadaljujemo in bom zopet k besedi povabil Mikkela Christoffersena, sledi predavanje z naslovom Spreminjajoča se pokrajina e-izposoj v Evropi. Mikkel Christoffersen, The Changing Landscape of the E-Lending in Europe. Please.
Thank you. You can hear me, right? Yep. So, hello again. I'm not going to present myself again. Though it seems like there are a bit fewer of you. Did we lose some in the lunchroom? Yes. Right, okay. So let's talk about e-lending. As I showed you in my first, here they come. As I showed you in my first presentation, Iblida did a report on e-lending in Europe, and there were actually a lot of countries who could not or would not report. It was my predecessor who did the report. I don't know why Slovenia is not a part of it, because you have certainly a well-established e-lending solution. But as you can see here, this is the e-lending per person in that country. And over here is the physical lending per person for that country. And it's showing, even with physical lending, some dramatic differences. But with e-lending, it's completely crazy. With Denmark at 1.2, and as I said, we are at 1.6 now, down to Greece at 0.002. Spain is also pretty catastrophic. And for some of the countries who are not here, for instance, Portugal, they don't have an e-lending solution, so they would be 0. I know Greece is having a lot of problems too. Not Greece, Bulgaria, just for instance. So the countries who are not here might not be here because they are actually doing worse than this. But as I said in my first before lunch, these differences are completely insane. If all of Europe had the same number of digital loans per person as Denmark does now, we would have something like 750 million digital loans in Europe. And the amount of digital users would be its own country, and it would be the biggest country in Europe. So I have been involved in e-lending, various experts groups over the years, and in the Naples e-book working group, where Marco from Belletrina has been, and Aleš has been for many years, we've been trying to figure out how to work with this problem. And what we got to in the end is that there are two kinds of problems with e-lending. The first problem is getting the books. And this is what's happening in Greece, for instance, that there are publishers just don't want the libraries to have e-lending because they think that it's a commercial competition, and why would you pay for books if the library has them, and so on. But then in some countries where there are more successful e-lending, they have another kind of problem, which is, first and foremost, what does this do to the library profession when suddenly a lot of your lending is done from digital spaces? These people, you might never see them. They might not even know that they're using a library solution. How do you cater to them? How do you promote the literature? And then in the end, if you're too successful, and the library sort of switches to be first and foremost a digital institution, what does that do to the library itself? Because if you ask people, most people love the public library. And people love the public library even though they don't use it, which is quite unique for libraries. Everybody agrees that libraries are a good thing. Even in America, you will even have Trump supporters who thinks that libraries are supposed to be here and we should fund them, even though Democrats also use them. So the European countries will sort of shift between having type 1 problems and type 2 problems. And if you solve your type 1 problems, you will have type 2 problems. And you're never safe because you can only until there's legislation here, and there is not, until there is legislation, you're never safe, even though you might, as we do in Denmark, at the moment we have the world's best e-lending service. But my phone could ring right now, and it could be all the Danish publishers saying, we don't want our books on your service anymore, and then we don't have an e-lending solution. So we are never safe from not going back to the type 1 issue. So, as the poet said, there are two tragedies of life. One is not getting what you want, and the other is getting it. Translate into, there's one tragedy of e-lending is not getting any books, and the other tragedy is getting all the books, especially the audiobooks. The first poet was Oscar Wilde, and the second is me. I showed you Aeschylus, the Greek tragedy poet, before lunch, and there is actually a passage from his tragedy Agamemnon. They're talking about Helen of Troy, but they're talking in a parable of a lion cub. So this is very old English. But a hunter brings home a lion cub and for a pet, and everybody loves this lion cub. It's cute and it's cuddly, like e-lending. And then it grows and it starts showing its nature, its teeth grows and its claws grows. And one day the hunter comes back and the lion has now killed his entire livestock and his entire family. So I'm not trying to sound dramatic, but e-lending, if it's left completely unchecked, has the potential to erode the very foundation beneath public libraries. And also academic libraries, because the academic library publishers or scientific journal publishers will try and bypass the library and go directly to the students, go directly to the researchers. Many academic libraries are now actually a technical service in a room back somewhere negotiating licenses. Another thing is that there are one rule of digital libraries in Europe. It is that our physical libraries look pretty much like each other, and our digital libraries look nothing like each other. And this is because they were allowed to grow before we had a chance to sit down and talk about what do we actually want. So when we first started collaborating and having European collaboration on this issue, things had already shot in all kinds of different directions. There is not two countries in Europe where their service kind of looks a little bit like each other. Even the Nordic countries, and especially with libraries, but in most other things also, people have a hard time distinguishing one Scandinavian country from each other because we're all this Scandinavian socialist paradise. And, but our digital solutions also don't look anything like each other. And this is very, very bad because digitization is only going to increase, right? This is the introduction of the new Pope in 2005. This is the introduction of the new Pope in 2013. Can you see the difference? Everybody, and I mean everybody, this is New Year's Eve in Paris, right? Everybody has a mobile phone, or two. There was American research where 10% of people said they check their phones while having sex. I have colleagues who believe they can make young people put down their phone and pick up a physical book. And I will point to this and say, really? Really? So the only way we can make children, young people, read is to put the books on the mobile phones, not let them put down the phones and pick up a book. That may happen once in a while, but it's not a long-term solution. Also, they don't read, as you may remember, right? Almost 1 in 5 American teenagers says they are on YouTube constantly. I don't even know how they do it, how you're on YouTube constantly. But that's what they're saying. And when it's not YouTube, it's TikTok. Right? Once again, if we are supposed to make these people read, these young, we need to have the books on their phones. We need to have digital reading. So a way of looking at European e-lending solutions I was asked by the Nordic Council of Ministers, they asked me if we could make a Nordic e-lending service, which is a brilliant idea, so I said no. That's the short answer. The long answer is also no. I spent 2 hours telling this person why it was a very, very bad idea, and she said, oh great, could you make a report? So there is actually the long answer over here. It means digital loans, possibilities and challenges in the Nordic countries. The problem, of course, is all these different payment models, border issues, but it's unfathomable. It's incredible that the Nordic countries are even more interwoven than EU countries are. People move all the time between Norway and Sweden and Denmark. We don't have to show a passport and all that thing. And so if a Danish person who's using the Danish e-lending system then moves across the bridge to Sweden, they can no longer access the Danish e-lending service because they are not in Denmark anymore. But they can still request physical books. And this is intolerable. But this report sort of gave us an idea of what do you need to do, what do you need to build, and what is a way of looking at e-lending services. One of them is that you either, when you have to build somewhere, you have to change your system, you will choose an existing service like Overdrive or Borrow Box or whatever they're called. Belletrina, maybe. You use an existing one. The problem with that is, as my one American colleague told me, that kind of feels like going into the bar, putting down your credit card and saying everything's on me, and leaving the bar, coming back the next day and picking up the tab. These people will not become library clients or library users or library loaners. They will become clients of that service. So if you use Overdrive, for instance, people feel they're using Overdrive, not the local library, unless you do something about it. Another way of doing it is just taking things that are out there, something open source, and making it your own, like they did in Finland, where they've taken all sorts of open source solutions, and they've made a certain and special Finnish one. Or you can completely make it from scratch, which we did in Denmark. So it's nowhere near as wonderful and nice as Overdrive is, but it's our own. So people are using their local library. It's obvious, it's evident. Then you need to choose a collection, which is not, it's an obvious question, but it's not that obvious once you get into it. What do you want on your system? For instance, the Nordic countries, if we were supposed to make some sort of Nordic system, what should be there? Should it be all the Nordic literature in its original? Should we also have translations of the other Nordic languages? Should we have all the Nordic translations of foreign books? All the Slovenian books that are translated into the Nordic, should they also be there? Is that also Nordic literature? Maybe to cut down, you should only have national literature. Then you have to worry about genres. I'm saying this like it's a loaded question. Is it really the library's job to make sure that people have all the romance and erotic literature that they need? Is that the library's problem? As it is now, it is. And we also have this dream that we can make people read and they will start by themselves to read better things. But there was an American service called Script, it's still in existence, and they had this read all you like for something every month, and they went bankrupt. And they went bankrupt because too many American women was reading romance. And they could read a romance book in a day. So, these genres, and it's further compounded by the fact that some genres very soon will only come out as ebooks, like romance, like crime. Then your formats, do you want ebooks and audiobooks and podcasts and magazines? We have podcasts in the Danish system, but we're not too crazy about it. We started off by only having podcasts on literature. That makes sense. Nobody listened to them. Everybody listened to true crime anyway. By the way, the most listened to genre when people go to sleep, and people will listen to podcasts when they go to sleep, the genre they're using is true crime. So people are listening while they're falling asleep, listening to horrible crimes. And the reason is that some podcasts are like two people arguing and there's a lot of banter and laughing. It's difficult to sleep to. But true crime will usually be a very somber, quiet voice who talks like this and describes these. And it's much easier to fall asleep to. And then, like I said, audiobooks. Audiobooks is really checking along. This is the Finnish system. You can see here loans by audiobooks, loans and ebooks. So ebooks, audiobooks. In Denmark, it's even wilder. The blue ones are ebooks over the years, the red ones are audiobooks. And you can see from COVID, there's been a sort of plateau in the ebooks, and the audiobooks is just taking off. Because you can listen to audiobooks while you do something else. Reading an ebook is like reading a book like it's always been. You go like this anyway. You can have 10,000 books on this phone, but you still have to go like this, right? But you can listen to a book every day while you're washing up, doing the garden, going to work. This is so expensive. Right, and then you have to put in some friction. You have all these kinds of lending models which are all designed so that people won't spend too much on your platform. And it's very un-library-ish. For instance, monetary stops that they have many places. It's very depressing to put in these stops, like the library has no money now, so you can't borrow any books. I mean, nobody associates the library with a place where you go and then there are no more books. In America, they have tried making the customers come to the physical library. So you have to come to the physical library in order to sort of download your ebook, and then you can go home and listen to it, in order to force people into the physical library. The problem with that idea, it's a very ingenious idea. The problem is everybody knows what you're trying to do. It's very, very obvious that we're trying to force you into the physical library. Now, the way we got to so many loans in Denmark, as I just showed you a picture of our front end, it's not because it's a wonderful, brilliant solution. It doesn't look expensive or anything. I took over as chief negotiator in 2017, and I kind of realized very quickly that when we were debating and discussing with our publishers, we were always talking about the 2% most popular bestsellers. They need friction. Publishers need a friction in their library digital loans because they're trying to make money, which is actually okay. They're a commercial service. They need to make some money. But we also need friction because, like I said, if all our publishers and if all your publishers just said, you can have all the ebooks, you can have all the audiobooks, you would have to put in so many frictions, because you wouldn't be able to afford it. It would be a very, very strange service. So publishers need friction, and we need friction. You can't have a system that is cheap, with easy access, and all the great titles. As with anything else, when it comes to price and time and quality, you can only pick two. If you want something that's cheap and easy access, you won't get the good titles. If you want something that's cheap with all the great titles, they will put up all sorts of barriers. We can't have this system, this perfect system that we're dreaming of anyway, and if we did, we wouldn't be able to afford it. So our editorial team at this point had built up a lot of competence with Danish literature, children's literature. So we thought, why shouldn't we just have the 98% of the other books and not worry about the 2%? Let the market worry about the 2%. So now we do have the new titles, but they are restricted typically. And we also say to our publishers, if you have anything on our system, then we need to have everything on your system that you have, but not necessarily right away. You can take your time. And for that, we will promote and pay for all the other titles in your catalog, because 98% of the titles in a publisher's catalog is not making any money anyway. These books are not in the bookshops. Bookshops remove books after 10 weeks. It's only the libraries left to pay for all this. So our library system is 28% of the digital market, the library solution, which is a lot. But it's in a completely different place in the marketplace than the commercial services, because there are a lot of commercial services and they all have the same books. They have the same popular crime novels, the new popular romance, the new popular bestsellers. They all look like each other and we have all the rest. And this is how we got to that humongous amounts of loans. That's the only secret, which is not a secret. So now actually in other countries where people are fighting their publishers. These are, I know it's in Danish so you can't read it, these are promotional articles about literature on our system written by the publishers themselves. So these are publishers promoting their literature on the library platform. About a year ago, yes, I know it's in Danish. About a year ago, there was a revolution kind of among Danish authors that they were being paid extremely a few Danish kroner for streaming services. When they got their books streamed, they were being paid very, very low amounts of money. So they started bitching and complaining to their publishers. And the publishers said, this is the biggest Danish publisher, he said, the streaming services are selling the authors and our products way too cheap. Which is kind of strange because they made the contracts themselves. So everybody, publishers and authors, agreed that they were being paid too little money on the commercial services. And then the CEO of the third largest publishing company in Denmark said, well, that's because of the libraries. The libraries are to blame for all of this. It wasn't exactly clear how, but one thing he knew for sure was this is the library's fault. Because if the library was not here and taking all these customers away, we would have a lot more sales, so we would be able to pay a lot more. And then what happened, and this is the truly amazing part, this is the CEO of the largest digital publisher in Denmark, and they have subsidiaries. They have expanded to 35 countries all over the world. They're a gigantic company. He went out and he defended the library and said, you're stupid. And also you signed the contract yourself. Why are you complaining? So when we have fights in the Danish newspapers, the publishers will defend us from other publishers. So this is quite a love story. I actually haven't seen that anywhere else. And it's only due to the fact that the library is a second sales channel for all that literature that would not otherwise sell. The only things we don't have in Denmark are the completely new books, the completely new, brand new books. We will get them after a couple of months, but we don't have them right away. And if we did, like I said, we wouldn't be able to afford them anyway. So, in the end, when you're building your e-learning service, what about your front ends? Once again, do you want to choose existing ones? And do you want to integrate with your existing infrastructure? This is what we're doing in Denmark today and what we're talking about in other countries as well. When you have an app and you have your digital lending front ends out here and you're spending a lot of money on it, can you actually justify that? Like I said, when they're trying to pull people into the physical library, the way to do that digitally is to make the service an integral part of your digital space for your physical library. So your website, for instance, your web page. So they're trying to do that in Denmark, and I don't think it will work. Don't tell them I said that. Because people don't use our websites that much. They don't use our, but it's a way of trying to make all that money work for the physical libraries as well. And Elizabeth will tell you in a second about special user groups and how you can work with those. We have a collaboration with schools, so we have a special system for school children, which is tremendously popular. And the literature is being promoted by children for children. So this is the app for the normal service, and this is the app for the children's service. And it's got a completely different aesthetic. It's very obviously the same company who made it. But it's got a completely different aesthetic, and it's filled with videos of children talking to other children about literature. There's not an adult anywhere on all of this. And then there's our special service for English books. But there was 3 different front ends made for 3 different user groups. And then once more about the digital integration into the physical library, because we've been dreaming about this for years. This is an image from Singapore. They have wonderful, wonderful physical libraries. They always build them in shopping malls where people are. And typical for Singapore, they will have the latest digital solutions. So they have e-lending service at the end of the shelves. And these books here are the same ones that you find here. So that's great. It's really modern, it's really nice. And nobody uses them. Then they made wonderful digital reading screens. And it was difficult to get a picture of it, but this is a lady who's using that screen to read her physical book. And why? Well, we don't know. My theory is that when people visit a physical library, they're in a physical mindset. They don't care about all your digital offerings, so they're in a physical mindset. So there would be a queue. There would be a queue over here where the screen is with all the events taking place in the library that day. They're also very proud of how many children visit their library. I found them. We have the exact opposite problem with them. And once again, is it more likely that they will put down their phone, go pick a physical book, or is it more likely that we get them to read by putting the books on their phones? These digital users have become a user group completely of their own. These are Danish figures. So 45% are strictly physical users, 34% are strictly digital users, and only 20% use both the physical and the digital. But half the population in Denmark uses the library at least one time a year. 34% of them only uses us digital. Right? So I think Denmark is about 3 times the size of Slovenia. So this is your entire library service. It's the same figure. This is both a very, very good story because it's a new user group that we would not otherwise reach. These are completely new user groups. We've reached completely new user groups. It's wonderful. But it's also, we've reached completely new user groups. It's a catastrophe. Who's going to pay for this? Because if we don't get any more funding, and we don't, you can only take it from the physical. Right? So the only way to really invest in the digital, unless you get more funding, is to cannibalize from the physical. And the demographic trends, or the loan trends, so to speak, are not in our favor because these are physical loans in Denmark over the years. You see COVID here. And these are the digital loans over the years. Now, I've actually asked Excel to make a prognosis of when these two will meet. And I didn't want to show you because it's very depressing. Excel says that this is just a blip. It will keep going down, and this will keep going up, and they will meet in 2027. In 2027, the digital loans will take over physical loans, according to Excel. So, the only solution to this, and now only speaking for myself, but the only solution to this I can find is we need to build a digital library. We really need to build an actual digital library and not just an app with digital books in it. Because a little app with digital books in it reduces the library to the transaction of checking out a book. But the library is so much more than just checking out a book. And all the great things about libraries that we talked about before lunch, we don't have in our e-lending services. Our e-lending service is only about the transaction. There's no relationship building. There are no book clubs. No one is getting better at anything. Nobody's learning anything. Nobody's meeting anybody. Nobody's discussing anything. They're just checking out books. And we can't have a service that takes all our money that's only about checking out books. So I think we have to have a digital public library. And if you look at, and this is the last slide, if you look at the value creation in the physical library, right, we try to put it up as a pyramid here. This might as well be the physical library. You have an infrastructure and a collection. On top of this, you build access and functionality and all your great things. This means you have a foundation to have a library service. On top of this, and this is where it gets interesting because this in and of itself is not very interesting. On top of this, you build the promotional things like subject guides, author portraits, articles, podcasts, all these things to promote the literature. If you can inspire people to do it, you maybe can inspire them to actually learn something, to be more critical of where they get their sources, when they interact with information, be more reflective about their taste, what kind of literature do they want. And in the end, if you can put them all the way up here, they will start by themselves to review books, to volunteer, to run book clubs, to do debates and all this. This is where, it's not that this is the end all, this is where we all need to be, but this is where the library has the most value. This is where the library creates more value for the individual citizen. And every step builds on the step below. And when you learn something and then you change your functionality and you learn something and you change your collection, and this is all one big feedback loop. But in the digital library, we've only made it to here. But there's no reason why we could not make a digital library that has all the other steps that are really interesting and where the public library especially really shines. This would also explain and justify why we are spending these grotesque amounts of money on digital lending, because it's so expensive. So I'll leave you with that thought.
Thank you very much.